shifts, especially today, because today we have a heavyweight, and I am very much excited. This session is going to be facilitated by the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Humanities at our university, that is Professor Pamela Maseko. I don't have the entire afternoon, because if I were to tell you about Professor Maseko's achievements, it will take me the entire afternoon. You don't want that, and you don't want me to take up her time. I will just tell you that Professor Maseko has published extensively in the areas of language policy and planning, language and social justice, power and knowledge, around African language literacy heritage as well. So, Prof. Maseko, I don't want to read your extensive CV. I will just hand over to you, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this for us. And thank you. We are indebted to you for your generosity to take up the space. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Tony. And for the kind words. It's very, sometimes it's difficult to hear or to understand and internalize what people say about you. So you're very kind. Thank you very much. What I'm going to do, I'm going to try and share my screen. If I do that, Dr. Tony?
You should be able to.
Try and do that. You can just bear with me a little bit. If I struggle with this, as I always do, I will just send it to you and you can.
No worries.
Then let me just try and see what I want to share.
It's coming up. There it is.
It's coming up. Great. Okay, let me just.
It is there. Can you put it on slideshow mode, presentation mode?
Okay. How is that? Great.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to be talking with you about. Fortunately, I've been given the title to talk about, and I'm going to be emphasizing some areas more than others. But what is important here, Dr. Tony, is that I'm going to try and make this as much interactive as possible, because one of the beliefs I have, both as a scholar and specifically a sociolinguist, is that all of us know, and the problem mostly is the ignorance from other people who do not know what we know. And so I am coming here with a plea from all the participants that please engage with me and with each other. So I'm going to cover mainly the four areas: multilingualism, academic literacy, literacies. I like the fact that we're not emphasizing one form of literacy, but we look at academic literacies, and looking at language, knowledge, and power, and then end off with multilingual pedagogies. Often, we make assumptions that when we talk about multilingualism, we all know what multilingualism is. And because the root of the word is on language, and obviously multi, but the root of it is in language, we often tend to prioritize language. But multilingualism has got different components to it. Well, is the language, the multiplicity of languages, within an individual. So for instance, I speak isiXhosa as my primary language. I speak English, I speak a little bit of Afrikaans, ek praat 'n bietjie Afrikaans. I speak isiZulu, little bit of French, little bit of Mandarin and all that. So within me, I've got those languages. And the second aspect of multilingualism is societal multilingualism. So when we talk about societal multilingualism, is that you may be a monolingual, you may be speaking one language, but the environment in which you exist has got more than one language in it. For instance, in South Africa, you have multilinguals mostly, and this is not, there's evidence, scientific evidence for this. Most monolinguals are English speakers. So they are individual monolinguals, but they are in existence in a multilingual society. So the society itself has got multiplicity of languages. We're gonna come back to this and engage with what does it mean for the kind of classrooms we interact in. The second aspect here is cultural diversity. So obviously, when you speak a language, there's a whole lot of experience, there's a whole lot of culture, traditions, values, and all kinds of philosophies that you bring in with that language. So there's cultural diversity that exists that is not often recognized when we speak of language. So when we talk about multilingualism, we often emphasize that you must speak English, Xhosa and English, or other languages, and we don't engage with what do you bring with all these languages. And so multiversality is another aspect of multilingualism, in that in as much as we bring the cultures, the philosophies, traditions and all that, we're also bringing knowledges embedded within certain cultures, within certain languages. So multiversality means the worldview that is diverse in nature, that constitutes many other knowledges. And the fourth aspect I want to talk about when we talk about multilingualism is that we have, all of us have got primary languages. And there's contestations about what is a primary language. Often, until in the South African situation, and maybe the world over as well, is that often we grow up speaking a certain language, the language that we socialized in when we grow up. So, for instance, I grew up speaking isiXhosa. And it happens many a times that you get educated in that language, you go to school, informal education, basic education, university education, and you get educated in that language. And that language is a primary language, is a dominant language that you use. At times, you have a primary language and the second language or the additional language gets introduced to you much later in life. And it doesn't get to the point where you are proficient enough for you to be able to put the primary language and the additional language at the same level. So you have a primary language and an additional language, which is a second language. So in my case, isiZulu is a second language, and English is a third language, but maybe they are at the same level. So both of them are maybe at second language level, and they are additional languages. But you've got contexts in South Africa specifically where, and not specifically, the world over, where children grow up speaking a certain language, and when they begin school, at primary language, they switch to a different language, which in most cases in South African context is English. And because their primary language is not supported in formal learning contexts, so the English, the additional language, exceeds the level of the primary language so much that it takes over and becomes a primary language. So you've got, in South African context, where languages are often associated with race, ethnicity. Okay, so I'm black, I must be speaking a black language, and you're white, you must be speaking English or Afrikaans. You colored, you must be speaking Afrikaans or English. But in South African context, you've got these really, for lack of a better word, messed up the definition of a primary language and its association with this identity marker of race. That you've got black kids who have got primary languages as English or Afrikaans. So, but what is important about primary language is that the primary language is the language that you get socialized in, and if it's supported well at different levels of education, it becomes the language with which you access knowledge, in which you engage with knowledge, with which you're able to create knowledge from what you have been, the new knowledge you've been introduced to. It's a knowledge which you can draw from in relation to your experience to reconstruct new knowledge. So that's really important for us to understand as we go forward with this. The next exercise is the following slide. I would like us to just as an exercise, just maybe one or two. I can't see Dr. Tony, the group. So I would like you to guide me there. I would like us to greet in one's language, maybe 5, 6. I think I saw about 18 people just when I was when I checked in. Just maybe 5, 6 people to greet in your language, and then give us a loose translation of your greeting. What does it mean? And what cultural, social, and other experiences does your greeting encode? What does it capture? And does that capture, which is captured in your greeting, matter in the project of knowledge production? So Dr. Tony, I would like you to just like, I would like hands here, I would like participation, if you don't mind. And Dr. Tony, if you can just like give me a sense of who is raising their hand, or if you can probe people if there are no volunteers.
Okay, thanks, Prof. Maseko. We have about 27 people in the room. There are no hands, and I know I am known for picking on people, so I'm hoping that people will raise their hands before. Yes, James. James has raised his hand.
Great.
Over to you, James.
Hi. Okay, I speak Sepedi, so this is how our greetings ordinarily go. So I would say Dumelang to whoever I'm saying to, and then they will say, okay, let me just speak in Sepedi for it to be easy. So if I greet somebody, there'll be Dumelang, they say Are le kae, and then I'll say Rona le kae, and then they would turn say Lerna Rona. Loose translation of my greeting. So I think that would be.
Can we start? Can we focus on? I'm really excited with this. Can we focus on Dumelang?
Yes.
A loose translation of that. Yeah.
Dumelang. Yeah. I can't really translate it, but in my thought, when I raised my hand, I actually wanted to explain that greetings are always in plural. That's where I wanted to go. Or it's as though when you're greeting an individual, it's as though you're greeting a group of people, even if it's just one person. So that's why I wanted to go. Or what does it mean? Yeah, I really don't want to tie myself and lie, unfortunately.
So what cultural, social, and other experiences does it capture? Do you know?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that when you're greeting a person, Kaspedi, in that way, you're actually acknowledging the person and their being not as an individual, but as an extension, I would say, of them and their heritage or their ancestry or so in other words, motho ga se an individual, but they represent a
A
collective,
community, a collective.
a community. Thank you.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. Okay, great. Um, if Dr. Tony, you see, I would like us to
I have two more. I have Gabriel and Bali.
Just one last question to James. Does this matter? You're saying you greet in plural. It signifies that an individual is never recognized as an individual. So there's no individualization. It's often a collective. So which also talks to something that I'm going to talk about later. So there is a collective as opposed to an individual. But does it matter in the project of knowledge production in the university? Does that matter? And why does it matter? James?
I think I'm out of my depth here, Prof. I think I'm out of my depth. Yeah, I think I'm out of my depth.
Do you think it's important for us to know that? Do you think it's important for that knowledge to be shared? So, for instance, I know in English that I say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and it's recognizing the time of the day and how you relate that to a greeting. And it's common knowledge. We're talking about simple things. Greeting is very simple. We can go to other philosophical matters. So I thought we could use greetings because we've come from different disciplines, at least we greet. So, but generally, could that matter? Could that knowledge matter in the project of knowledge production?
I think earlier today we're talking about, I can't remember what we're talking about, but I remember us answering a question that I think it's assessment, that it's a collaborative effort ordinarily between the lecturer or the teacher and the students. And I think in the university context, so I think as recognizing ourselves as a collective community, being even in a classroom, being the teacher, the lecturer, and the student, that we always are in this interactive, we are locked in this interactive ecosystem where we are always together. Although I'm an individual as a lecturer, but in order to do my work, I always have to interact with somebody else, primarily the students. And for them to do well in what they came to the university to do, they have to interact with somebody else, which is going to have to be me as a lecturer or HOD or whoever. So I think I would frame it that way.
Okay, great. I think thanks so much, James. Let's hear others. Dr. Tony?
Gabriel, after Gabriel, it will be Mbali.
Okay.
They've raised their hands.
Thanks. Thank you. Gabriel?
Oh, thank you very much. I'm from Zimbabwe. So we have got a Shona way of greeting. The generic one is Makadini. It means how are you? But as you can hear, well, like what James has been saying, it's in plural. It's like I'm addressing a lot of people. I could use it. I could use it when there is a lot of people to say Makadini, referring to a group of people. I can use it as a form of respect to one individual to say how are you, but it has got a respect. I'm sure you said you do also French. In French, there's a lot of feminism and masculinity in yes, in how you speak it. So that's how we do greet in Shona. Yeah.
Okay, great. So you've kind of touched on the cultural and social experiences. You can expand on that if you want to, but I would like to again to ask this important question for our purpose in the academy. Does that matter in the project of knowledge production? Does what you bring in now matter?
I think it does. I think it does matter when it comes to language, because if we took it in the context of research, for an example, you would find out that language, I can share a quick experience when I went for a field work. I could not, I was not going to be able to relate to a chief without having good language that I was speaking to his police person, something of that sort. Actually, I was not even supposed to speak to him directly. I would speak to him through an intermediary person, but speaking that language. But after the meeting we had, we started talking to each other outside the house. As long as you're inside that house, you speak a certain language and using certain protocols of that language in that house. Just getting out of the door of that house, now it's like a different world altogether. So that language is very, very important in our discussion. If I can use that example, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Gabriel. Dr. Tony, did you say Mbali?
Yes, Mbali.
Mbali?
Okay, thank you, Prof. Sanbonani. My language is isiZulu. When I say Sanbonani, it will be I'm greeting a group of people. At the same time, I'm not greeting them as an individual, but I'm greeting them as a holistic person, or it shows that I come with my ancestors or my heritage as well. I'm not just greeting you as Umbali, but Umbali who belongs somewhere. Umbali or Wamachola or Umbali from Abatakwana. So I'm not just an individual. I have my roots where I have people that I actually represent. So when I greet you, it's not just greeting you as an individual. So I will say to a group of people, Sanibonani, but if it's just one person, I will say Sawubona. So the sa at the beginning, it's a plural. So we will kind of think that why did you not say Ngiyakubona? Because it's an individual. I am the one greeting you. I don't see these other people that you're actually referring to, which are your ancestors and who actually make up who Mbali is. So that's what it is in isiZulu, Sanibonani or Sawubona. That's what it is, because I'm a collective person. I think there are some similarities in African languages, as other participants have just attested to that when you greet as a collective, not just as an individual. So when you say Sawubona, it means I see you, I recognize you, I acknowledge you. It could be at any context that I see you, you are an adult. So the manner that I approach you will be different from how I will approach a child. I see you, you are white, you are not black. So my approach as well, in order for us to have an engagement, there will be that difference, so that there will be a transmission of knowledge between the two of us. It has to do like yesterday we were going through like the values of our institution. I will pick on the one of respect for diversity as well. That it's not just a one size fits all. That I see you, yes, you are Professor Maseko, and then this is Miss Mbali Motakwana. So it has to do with class as well. It just has to do with categories of where the person is, and then it will also assist us in our engagements as well. But in overall, it has to do with respect and also with Ubuntu. That you can't just when you are or let's say even on the corridors in isiZulu, you can't just pass by a person without greeting them, whether you're going to have an engagement with them or not. But you must acknowledge a person. Like in English, maybe they'll be like you smile or you just show those gestures. In isiZulu, they'll be like, why is this person actually smiling at me, but they're not even greeting us? You know, they'll just take offense in that you are just smiling, and maybe it's like you are being sarcastic kind of thing. That's how Zulus will interpret that. But for a Zulu person, Zulu speaking person, they'll be like, Sawubona, Sanbona, and then they will pass by just to show that I see you, I acknowledge you. That's all. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mbali. Is there any other hand, Dr. Tony? Or should we continue?
There are no hands, no further hands, unless you want me to pick on
thank you so
someone.
much. Thanks, James, Gabriel, Mbali. We're gonna pick on the next next exercise. We're gonna pick on others. I think what really, in summary, what comes up here is that we all means specifically with greetings. We obviously have a way of expressing how we identify a person, how we recognize, not identify, how we recognize a person we see for the first time. And what seems to be the common trait in African languages is the recognition of people in existence with others, even if they are not present. So is the recognition of community. And what is significant for that, as opposed to other languages that really foregrounds singularity and plurality, or singular and plural, is that a person often comes in, is recognized as bringing in other people and recognizing the others. So the concept of plurality becomes really important in how we philosophize about things in the context of higher education. The concept of community becomes important, and you don't see those kinds of values and knowledge and experiences from this less dominant group in the context of knowledge production. You don't often see these knowledges integrated in what we learn, in how we learn, and so forth. What is important in the South African context is that obviously, I think if we are in South Africa, we know the politics of the country. We know the different phases of political regime, from imperialism, colonialism, apartheid, and democracy. We know that prior to democracy, there had been a systematic process of erasure of knowledge from other people. And I'm bringing this here in the context of language, is that when we look at language, we're going to talk about that just in a few moments. When you look at language, language is structured in such a way that if you really tease it out, you will be able to access meanings that relate to a society's experiences. And if we know, we know that a society's experiences is what knowledge is. So when we talk about Pluto and all those philosophers, when you talk about the theory of what is theory, Dr. Tony? Something falling down. What is so what is the theory, Prof. Tony, Dr. Tony, when something falls down? Gravity. Pardon me. We know that it's someone's experience, and that has been developed over a process of time. It's been developed, and it becomes the knowledge that we value in higher education. So there are knowledges that become valued, there are knowledges that don't become valued. And in the South African context, we know that there's, in African context, there's been systematic process of erasure of knowledge, and language is so important in unearthing that knowledge and making sense of that knowledge and engaging with it with all the tools that we have in academy for evaluation and valuing of knowledge. I think that is a lesson for me here. I just want to talk then about academic literacy, what we understand by that. But I wanted to often when we talk about literacies, Dr. Tony, we focus a lot on literacy as far as writing is concerned. But I would like to talk about oracy and what it means in our context. And I'm going to read what Walter Ong says, is that oracy is the reliance on proverbs or condensed wisdom for making decisions, on epic poetry and other oral practices as strategies of preserving and generating information in the absence of writing, or in our context, advanced writing of a language. So what is important here is that all of us possess information, whether it's in oral form or in written form. And there are ways of preserving that information in the context, or knowledge in the context of oral societies, or society where there is no advanced writing. And that knowledge is preserved in proverbs, in idioms, which are philosophical concepts in African languages. In epic poetry, where you can trace history, genealogies, societies' experiences, and all that. So these are all strategies that all oral societies adopt or adopted before literacy. So even English as we know it today, even Latin before it got taken over by English, Greek, and all languages, they had this strategy of preserving information. It still exists in society where writing is not known or is not advanced. The point I'm trying to make here is that oracy, or the oral form of language, is important. I don't want to say as important as English, because the academy makes the difference or distinction between what is written. And of course, the academy values what is written, the way we assess. We assess in written form, less on oral form. The way we differentiate between advanced literacies that are required for the abstract and intellectual thing. Even abstract thinking is a concept of literacy. So, or abstract knowledge is a concept of literacy. So, and then literacy on the one hand is the ability to acquire information, evaluate it, and ethically use it. I do want, when I put this down here, I was a bit hesitant because it would mean that in oracy, these things don't exist, but they do exist. Maybe not in as advanced a form as we require as students to use them. I said literacy is linked to writing, and writing is a technology that got introduced, that introduced new forms of preserving and generation of information. So when we talk about academic literacies, we're talking about, for me, we're talking about all these forms of literacies, whether it's oracy or literacy. But what's important for me is how do we use them so that students are able, with academic literacy, to understand and to interpret a range of academic vocabulary in context, depending obviously in each of the, in what is the norm or standards for each of the disciplines that you're involved in. So language obviously become important in this understanding, interpreting, whether it's through the oral form or the literacy. And so when we talk about multilingualism in the context of academic literacies, we're recognizing that there's multiple languages, therefore there should be multiple literacies. Okay? So What I want now, Dr. Doni, is to check for me again in hand, and if there's any hands up, what does this mean for what we teach and how we teach? I am recognizing. I went through the list that was provided to me, and I know that some of the participants are teaching for the first time at Nelson Mandela. Some of them are experienced, but I would like for you to share, even if you have not taught before, because you've been taught. So it could be, what does it mean for what you were taught, on how you were taught, or what you teach and how you teach. So I just want 1 or 2 hands there, Dr. Tony.
None as yet. Yeah, they are still reluctant to raise their hands.
What does it mean, recognizing the different forms of, I'll call them literacies, in the sense of them being literacy, and then multiple literacies in multiple languages? What does it mean?
Can I invite Tapelo to share his views?
Tapelo?
Hello, everyone. Truly, I'll just try to answer, but then this is my 3rd day here, so like I have never had any teaching experience at all. So,
Tapelo, maybe the way you can then, we can rephrase this to say, what does it mean for what you were taught and how you were taught? Because as teachers, we also bring in our experiences as students in the way we teach and in what we teach. Would you be able to respond then?
okay. I think in my experience in terms of teaching, being a student, it would have to be actually looking at the different backgrounds and norms and writing aspects of people, because like as individuals we have different ways of approaching situations, and yeah, it's a very hard question, truly.
Okay,
there are 2 more hands.
Great.
I have Jenny.
Thank
I
you.
have Jenny, Makosi, and the last one is going to be James. It's Jenny, Makosi, and sorry, Gabriel.
Maybe let our BYJ people go first. No.
Jenny, go. Jenny, go.
I love this. I think this is the most fascinating discussion, and I wish I'd joined in about the paucity of our English language greetings by comparison with that collective. Because in my community, we greet, we acknowledge relationships, and then we're very surprised if people tell us how they are, even if they ask. And so I think it's very important for the knowledge, the knowledge production process to acknowledge these things and know where we are different and know where we might want to change. But for this discussion, I think it's multi-leveled. But in our classrooms, and of course, people bring so many different rich experiences with them, both based in oral discourses and in others. But in our academic classrooms, I think one of the things we need to remember is that what might be familiar to us, especially those of us who've been teaching for a little while, but anybody who's done 3 years worth of study in a discipline is not familiar to other people. It's not familiar, and it can be quite alienating. So when we assess our students, whether they're face-to-face or in an assessment situation, it is extremely dangerous to make judgments before they have acquired the kind of language that they need in their disciplines. And I think that's one of our key tasks. If we want our students to become advocates in their disciplines, to become really fluent as fully fluent community members of a discipline, then it's our job to actually facilitate that. And that is not to clone them into believing everything about academia, but at least if you know the game, you can undermine it. And it's that balance. Anyway, I don't want to say any more now, but I think, thank you. This is really so interesting.
Prick your brain there, pick your brain, Jenny. Then how do you involve them whilst you are in the process of getting them to acquire the form of literacy that is required for your discipline? How do you engage with them?
I don't think there's only one answer to that, but one of the answers is to really work hard with students' lives and experience as they bring it in. I think the minute our students believe that we don't value what they bring, I know it and you don't really, and you come from a place that is implicitly deficient, as soon as we highlight that in any way at all, we've lost altogether any kind of good relationship. So it seems to me that respectful valuing of our students' experience is always the starting point. It's always where we begin, and only then can you start translating it. I think there's ways of scaffolding the kind of reading we give our students. I think there are ways of mediating it. And again, I think there's a huge balance between patronizing people who bring in a huge amount of rich knowledge and we who need to facilitate the acquisition of these academic languages, because our students need to read those languages without losing their oracy and other things. So that's why I said it's multi-layered.
Great.
I don't have any easier answer than that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That's really useful, valuable. Okay, I think the next one is Makosi.
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
thank you very much, Doc. Prof, a lot is coming into my mind now. As we look into the multilingualism and the literacy coupled together, I think the first point, it starts from the, like as we were discussing yesterday, that diverse background of all of the students that will be maybe encountering with or teaching. It goes to acquiring prior knowledge, the knowledge that they have. How do they know it? Let me make an example, Prof. In a classroom of mathematics, students, when they start thinking of the subject, they think of abstract concepts, they think of concepts which are foreign to them. Now it becomes a responsibility of the facilitator or the coordinator to start buying their interest using language. Then the students will start gradually getting used to the concepts in terms of language by familiarizing the concepts to the students' background and students' experiences. In so doing, you will now be in a position to can furtherly move to the next step of now checking their multi-literacies, whereby you will now try to win their understanding in terms of checking how they interpreted the first stage of buying their language and understanding the concepts according to their different backgrounds. So I would understand it from that point of angle, and also related in a term that in the past we used, before COVID, you would have face-to-face. So in terms of subjects like maths, which are concrete, you'd find that you'd have to start first by code switching to buy in their interest, because when you call something in terms of English without explaining that in their familiar language, you'd find that they become very blank. But when you code switch and you buy their interest into the language that they are familiar with, you'd find that now they tend to unfreeze, they tend to be at ease, and they tend to develop interest.
Great. It's lots is coming out. Thank you so much. Thank you, Makosi. And then did you say it's Gabriel? The
Yes.
next one? Okay, Gabriel.
Thank you very much, and thanks to the last speaker. Yes, in many of my classes, I would see that the disadvantage though here is that you'll be an international lecturer, let's say, and a student wants to express their knowledge in their own language. I remember some of the guys, what do you call this, Onini? And they start saying it in Kosa to try to relate to another colleague to say, please help me to tell this lecturer that, I want to say this, and I'm saying it in this language, you see? And then somebody translate it, and then so that we can actually get to understand. So I think it's very, very important. And I believe also that's the reason why we are trying even to question some of our theories, bringing the new concept of indigenization of knowledge production, to say let's develop, all our theories been most of them come from Western countries, and having been shaped their literacies with their own language. We even have countries where they don't even speak that English. They learn in the universities, they learn whatever they learn in those universities in their own language. Countries like China, Germany, you want to go and study there, they say first year of your academic career, you've got to learn the German language first, so that when then you start engaging in your different courses, you have at least a certain understanding of what they will be teaching you. That's why it is very important. Multilingual academic literacies. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. I think what comes out here is that I think from Jenny and Makosi Gabriel is that our classrooms are multilingual, and multilingualism is a norm. And the points that both or all the three speakers are bringing in is that students want to communicate their understanding, their interpretation of what is taught. They want to communicate it in their home languages. But do our classrooms allow that? Do we have methodologies that allow students or to move away from the teacher as center of in the production of knowledge process? Is there do we have methodologies where we shift away from the teacher and we focus on the students? And if we do, when that happens, what is the role of the teacher? And what happens to the knowledge that gets produced by the students that was not part of the original input from the teacher? So those are the questions that come up as we try to engage with this issue of multilingualism. The other important thing I want to raise as we go to the next slide is that multilingualism in the South African context is a norm, and perhaps in an African context is a norm. There is no, if I were to ask now how many languages are in this virtual room, we can maybe get to 10, 12. It's a norm. And so if we don't recognize that in how we teach, we are really dehumanizing. I'm sure you've come across this concept of humanizing pedagogy, but we are dehumanizing our students. We are not recognizing what they are coming with. We are not recognizing the knowledge as important and using it to use Jenny's term, scaffold it so that they can acquire the knowledge of the discipline. So I think multilingualism is a norm. I think that should be the buzzword. If you didn't get anything out of this presentation, the important thing is that multilingualism is a norm in the South African context, and therefore in our classrooms. My slide. Okay. I think I'm just looking at the time. We just need to move fast. I just thought that this is so important. Again, I use in my work on oracy and literacy, I use Walter Ong a lot. And so if one looks at the difference between oral cultures and written cultures or literary cultures, one can look at the difference. People do not feel themselves to be situated in abstracted computed time, that is oral cultures. They learn by apprenticeship, so they learn by practice, they learn by doing, they think in formulas and in mnemonics. Mnemonics are things like idioms, riddles, and they are really important in the preservation of knowledge, and they are situational. In terms of human interaction, and that is what came up in that conversation, genuine greetings, they are deeply communal and they are externalized. So that the oral cultures is displayed in this conversation that we had earlier on. The literary cultures exist at a particular moment in time, so it's fixated in a particular time. They learn by study, not by apprenticeship or doing things. They're analytical in thought, and they're abstract, often removed from the actual situation. There's more privacy and solitude, and there's a lot of introspection. We can look at that and engage about what it means, but maybe for later if we've got time for a question. So I just wanted to break this and tell a personal story, and I think it's going to be, I want to make it quick, about how, for me, the concept of language, lit up, or that light bulb moment. And I'm looking at language knowledge. I'm using this story to introduce the three concepts: language, knowledge, and power. So I started school many moons ago. And then on my first day of school, I came back and my grandmother asked me what I'd learned from school. And I proudly, as a 6-year-old, said, I've learned to say water. Okay, fundukuti, water. And then my grandmother, unimpressed, said, what about water? And then I said, water. And then out of irritation, she just said, amanzi lakanongala. I don't know how best to translate that, Dr. Tony. And nongala is this animal at the bottom, is freshwater crabs. So she said to me, water, the water wherein the freshwater crabs live. And this is my interpretation or translation of this. What that meant for me is that I went to school. I knew Amanzi in my language. I knew maybe even the cultural significance of water, because that is for cleansing, the spiritual aspect of things. But I also knew more about the habitats, that the water was a habitat for some animals. And of course, I could make tea from my grandmother if the water was too high, if the fire was too high. Obviously, the water bent, evaporated and bent. I knew all those things about water. And so what my grandmother was trying to tell me was that water, the concept water, is just not the concept, the term water is just but a linguistic representation of something that I already knew in my language. And what learning is supposed to do, it's supposed to take me from what I know and advance that knowledge. So I knew all these things. I knew that crabs stay in water. I knew that there were springs sometimes, or rainwater and so forth. I knew that water can change into various forms. I knew all that. The role of education, therefore, is to take the concepts that I know, move me beyond what I know and add more knowledge, rather than focus on what does this mean in a different, or what is this, not what it means, what is this in a different language. So I see our role as teachers in the academy is not focusing so much on the language, but on the experiences that students bring into the classroom and what terms they bring that represent that experience. And how do we add onto that experience? How do we add new knowledge onto that experience? Naming that knowledge becomes a secondary part. So let me just move quickly then. So let me just then break down these concepts quickly. Language is the medium through which a society shares their values. If you're looking at language, their thoughts and opinions, and any society has got that. And it's made up of words that we use to name things and phenomena around us. And words that make up a language, this is where knowledge becomes important in a societal experience. Words that make up a language spring from the struggles to name the thoughts we have about different phenomena in our social surrounding. I'm just going to make an example that often we don't always recognize. English has gotten, and I'm going to make an example about English because it's the language I know better than other languages that also most of us know here. English has got, as French, similarly with French, it has got strong gender markers. So you've got to have, if I'm speaking to Tando, to Dr. Doni, I know that is she. If I'm speaking to Jenny, she. If I'm speaking to Gabriel, I know that is he. And so, and when it comes to African languages, there's no gender marker. There's only one marker, which is u, and that u just links the verb to the noun which you're speaking about. And it just so happens that in people, it is u. So I will say, Unothando uyathetha, and I'll say, Gabriel uyathetha. But I say, Jenny speaks, she speaks, but Gabriel, he speaks. And so what does it mean for our societies? When I say the language, the words make up a language, spring from the struggles to name thoughts. For me, one of the hypothesis I'm making from this is that the stratification of Xhosa society, because I'm studying Onguni society, because I'm studying Nguni languages, the social stratification is not determined by gender. There are other forms of social stratification. So age, for instance, someone brought up age, class, rank, and so forth. Whereas in Western society, where English is spoken, the focus is on gender. So those are the things that that knowledge, when you talk about language and what is encoded in the language, that is the knowledge that we don't often get to interrogate. That is a knowledge that we often are not able to decipher in class and get the students to talk about. So, and then knowledge, whilst language, so let me put it, language is the source of knowledge for any society speaking that language. Knowledge is generated from the manner in which a society makes of, struggles with, and interacts with its social and natural environment. And like I said, I'm repeating this. So words are the dress that covers the idea of the ideas of a society. This is so important for us when we think about language. I'm trying, Dr. Tony, to move away from us conceptualizing language as this technical, scientific tool of communication. It's more than that, okay? Knowledge is best internalized, communicated, and reconstructed in one's primary language. We need to just keep, I repeat that later on, but I just want us to keep that. So what is power? It's so important in the South African context to understand that language issues and knowledge issues are not neutral, but there's power relations involved in them. So power is constructed when one determines, controls, and wields authority on what is to be valued in society. And we may not even need to look in the context of South Africa. We can go to Europe. I made an example now that Latin had been dominant before, if one studied the Roman Empire, the English empires, and so forth. So when the shift moved to English, I think it was King Henry V, with I'm not good at that history, but when the focus was on moving the power from Latin to English, and then translations of the Bible and key texts and so forth. So there was construction of value of English at that level. And the spread of that through imperialism and colonialism was a continuation of that. And of course, in recent memory, the construction of power around Afrikaans. So what I want to leave for this slide is that what we have is powerful languages are not actually powerful more than our primary languages, but they are languages of power, and I talk about that. I'm going to skip this because we're running out of time, and then I just want to summarize it. All languages are powerful, and therefore all knowledge is powerful. Okay, whether it's knowledge is articulated orally or in written form. Some languages and knowledge are constructed as possessing more power than others. And what is important is that this is a construction. It's a social constructed aspect. And the universities are institutions of power. This is where we construct things as more important than others. So we are spaces that construct and maintain power and marginalize, specifically around knowledge and power. The fact that I go to the classroom and teach in English, now it's in policy, there's things, but it had, before it became policy, it had just been automatic that when I go to a university classroom, I speak in English or I speak in Maseko. And language is a repository and transmitter of knowledge of a society. Monolingualism in favor of English in South African higher education stands in sharp contrast to diversity characteristics of all South African higher education institutions. Let me quickly go through that. I would like to talk about the pedagogies that we engage with when we talk about multilingualism and multi-literacies. I think the first one that I talked about this earlier on in response to input from Jenny, Marcos, and Gabriel, is that you will have, I'm sure you will have heard that one of our guiding principles in what we do here is humanizing pedagogy. And I took this directly from the website, Dr. Doni, because I think it best describes what we're seeking to do here. That a humanizing pedagogy is to develop the kind of teaching and learning interface that enables agency, a sense of coming not only to know, but to own knowledge and be empowered by it. And this sense of coming and owning knowledge and being empowered, but what is important in humanizing, when you have an agency, for me, what's important and that is missing is that you have to draw from something that you know best, and making sense of this, and owning this and being empowered by it. You can only know something, but only if you can relate to it in the context of what you've experienced before. And the next concept is language as a resource. Okay. What does language as a resource mean? Is that often in the South African context, when we talk about language, the one thing, when we say, let's introduce multilingualism, oh, no, there's no resources, no, there's no teachers who speak, it's gonna create, it's gonna entrench difference more than social cohesion. So when we talk about multilingualism, we see it often as a problem. But when we talk about multilingual pedagogies, we're seeing language as a resource, and resource in the context of what students can draw, relating this to humanizing pedagogies, is what they can draw from in making sense of what is it that they're encountering in the classrooms, in adding to the new knowledge, in owning the knowledge, and going out there and being empowered by it. So we need to shift from the common practice that language is a problem. And obviously, the slight, so these things, they converge. When we talk about funds of knowledge, for instance, it's knowledge encoded in student experiences, as we have talked here, and prior knowledge. And then something that I think it was Dumelang, no, it wasn't Dumelang, it was it Makosini? Talked about code switching. Someone talked about code switching. Makosi, was it Makosi? Anyway, so, but what's important about translanguaging, the last point I'm trying to make, translanguaging means to purposefully use language. Someone said that I think it was Gabriel, said that you introduce a concept and you use a language that is not necessarily the language of learning and teaching in that context. You introduce that concept, you get everybody to understand what that concept means, and then you purposefully then use that knowledge to get the students to understand the concept in the medium of instruction. I think it's a very, very basic definition of what translanguaging is. But what it does, what it enables translanguaging is that it enables the kind of diversity we want in the classroom, because I'll make this example again, I made in a different context, is that I was teaching at Rhodes University and I was teaching a class, and then there was a concept that our students were grappling with, and that is paternalism. And so we explained, no, it's a male person making the other feel that they must protect them. So all this, and so one student said, oh no, this concept does exist in Xhosa, and it's in the form of an idiom, okay, and a metaphor rather, not an idiom, and the idiom is ukulawula ngeqodu, and that is translanguaging, because then what happens is that ukulawula ngeqodu, she had to translate that, like what we did in the morning, and then bring in the cultural connotation around that, okay, and bring in the knowledge around it. And therefore, the other students in the classroom were enriched in that they understood the knowledge from other cultures, and they integrated it with the knowledge that they know about paternalism. And of course, if one looks at the root of paternalism, it's not even an English word, it's a Greek word. So it's all translanguaging is one of the important strategies, multilingual strategies that are used as opposed to code switching. Yes, someone talked about code switching, as opposed to code switching, because code switching, you would be switching between languages without necessarily facilitating effective learning or acquisition of knowledge. Translanguaging is using the language, but with the purpose of enabling the students to learn and understanding the different knowledges in the classroom. The next one is that often when we say we're talking about the multilingual usage or the multilingual pedagogies in the classroom, the question that we often ask is that, what about resources? Where do we draw from? Our resources are students. I think that is the primary source from which we can draw when we're talking about multilingualism. We don't have in the academy, I think the frankness of this is that in as much as transformation of the academy happened in terms of student demographics, but we are slow in terms of transformation in staff demographics. And so therefore, the majority of the staff that come to our classes are monolinguals. Or you've got I see Mandela, we've got basic, maybe 30-40%, they've got the basic conversational level of isiXhosa. And a level that does not get us to where we want to be in terms of academic literacy. But as a teacher, what we should be doing, Dr. Doni, is equipping our academy, our faculty members, with the skills, with the know-how of dealing with linguistic diversities in the classroom, and how we use that to enable epistemic access. We are in the project of knowledge creation. We are in the project of knowledge production, and so the use of language it's not just for purposes of saying hello, kunjani, and so that it's not a transactional tool like that. It's a tool for us to be able to get the students to acquire knowledge for success. So it's epistemic access, is access to knowledge for success. So I think that is that. And in terms of how we do that, there will be strategies that we will share at a different time here. And I hope that you'll be able to participate in our multilingual training project in collaboration with Dr. Tony. And of course, there are lexicographic materials, dictionaries. Often in the classrooms, we don't, especially in university, we don't use dictionaries. Even dictionaries, by the way, in the main language of learning and teaching. The lexicographic materials sometimes give the etymology of the word, the origin of the word, and the shifts that have happened over time. They give the general meaning, they give the academic meaning, or the meaning in the context of the discipline in which it is used. So those are really useful materials for what we want to do. And of course, there are bilingual and multilingual dictionaries, not as diverse as the English or Afrikaans monolingual dictionaries, but those are available for us. I think the one thing that we did, I think, when I was at UCT, was before coming to class, is to just lift concepts that we think students are struggling with. And then look them up in the dictionary, and then present them with your slides, present the concept and the closer definition of the concept, or isiZulu or Afrikaans definition of the concept, for students to be able to engage with you even as you are teaching. And the next one is bilingual or multilingual terminologies. There are lots of these that are really coming up. They've been generated. There are plus or positives and negatives about them. And most of them, mainly the arguments that are often raised is that they are developed outside of the context in which the speakers use these terminologies. So they are not always user-friendly in the classroom, or students don't experience them as they are written down, but they are there, and perhaps using them can be a way of engaging with them so that they can be revised. I know that Dr. Tony, there's quite a few in the university in different disciplines. And then the last one that is, I mean, it's really in my heart, this one. I like this because there are texts that people are not aware of that exist in the different disciplines. In isiXhosa, there are texts in zoology, in botany, in history, in philosophy. I'm just politics, just making an example, anthropology, and so forth. But we don't know of. And so bringing in those texts in the classroom to supplement, to complement what is being taught in the classroom in the primary language could mean that students are interacting with the same subject in the same way that when you give readings, you give multiple readings. You don't give one reading. You can give one reading in isiXhosa, and the students can interact with that. So we've got these in with us, and then we can share if there is any way we can. As a way of conclusion, mindful that it's, I would like for us to have time for questions, is that the importance of language lies not in it as a means of communication, but in its ability to convey knowledge that encodes values, norms, ideas, and thoughts of a society that speaks it. And given the brutal colonial imperial apartheid history of South Africa that introduced literacy, colonialism introduced literacy, and used this as a tool to construct power around Western languages and knowledge. The challenges that we have to unlearn, I think that is so important for us in the academy, to unlearn and relearn, to learn African ways of knowing. Or, if I can rephrase this in the context of language, relearn African ways of knowing using language. So the challenge lies not in lack of knowing, but in lack of making sense of what Africa knows through her languages. I'm going to stop there. Dr. Tony, we have 12 minutes in Dr.
Yes.
Tony? Oh, okay.
Yes, I was hoping that by now I will be flooded with hands, because I can't sit still. I am very much excited. And as they are busy preparing themselves, you know, yeah, they are clapping hands, you can see there. As they are preparing themselves to raise their hands, Prof. Maseko, thank you for this enriching conversation. I don't want to call it a presentation, because it's a conversation. I am enlightened, and if you were not following the chats, there are suggestions that that are linked to what you said. You know, the engagements that would be ongoing. Jenny is saying we need to extend this discussion in the form of an ongoing discussion or seminars, because this is important. My input is that it would be good for us to really internalize what you have said about the technicalities of language, of using terms, but transferring knowledge and information. So I want to pick your brain on the value of translations and how we can make them meaningful instead of just them being technical in nature. And I see some hands are coming, and I don't want to hog the space. I really want to give people an opportunity. And before you respond, let me give Tapelo an opportunity to make his inputs. Tapelo, over to you.
Hello, Prof. Once again. I just want to say that, yeah, your views and everything are actually very interesting, because I've never actually thought of language in this sense. It was always something basic. It was just a form of communication. And I think throughout the years, it had become a norm that everything or every aspect of my life was actually done in English. So you'd find that even in lectures as a student in the past years, you'd find that actually there's different languages. There's Pedi, Sotho, Xhosa, all languages were available, but then we could never actually realize if someone was struggling because of language or anything like that, because we have already set our focus on probably understanding the language, the one language that we were taught in. So it is actually interesting to actually be a part of this and actually hear how language is viewed in different, I'd actually say in this university, because it's actually the first time I'm actually hearing it being discussed in such a sense. So thank you for this opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe Dr. Donna, I can take 3 questions and then respond.
Felicitas, you make your inputs.
Hi, Prof. It's not a question, but also a comment. And I also share a couple of sentiments that I've always viewed language in a very basic and straightforward way. But your presentation or the conversation that was just had now has really enlightened me. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I really appreciate you giving time. And I actually wanted to comment with the first question you had, but I had a problem with my laptop. It was slow, so I couldn't raise my hand. I couldn't even comment. At some point, Teams kicked me out. But anyway, I think also what Dr. Doni said about maybe having this conversation again, because I think we didn't have enough time. I would really love to have more time and more discussions of this nature just to really understand language. And the way you've explained it is really, really amazing. And as you were talking, I was really having ideas about how I can structure my lectures, and also how I remember when I was in first year struggling, because I'm a lecturer in the Human Movement Science department. So how I would struggle to express myself because some of the concepts didn't really make sense to me. And also coming from a quintile 3 school, so like there were a lot of challenges that I had, and that's something that I would like to make better or present the opportunity to my students for them to be able to express themselves and really understand the context, the concepts that I'll be lecturing, and that they can express themselves in a language that they're comfortable with. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, can I just respond? I think let me just to comment on Tapelo and Ngweni's, so Felicitas input. I think the one response is that when people tell you to speak in English, or when people criticize students, we tend to do in the academy, when we criticize them based on their ability to speak or not speak English well, my response always is that language is not knowledge. And as a second speaker of a language, the fact that you are making mistakes, the fact that my grandchildren laugh that I can't make a proper distinction between 3 branches, green and what have you, and 3 number 3. They always make fun of me. I can't make a distinction between heart, which is this one, and the heart, which is when we go to the village. The fact that I'm not able to make those distinctions is an indication that I know another language. My phonological processes, the process of making sounds, are designed primarily for my primary language. And I'm using this in an attempt to make sense of this other language. So when they laugh at you, when you can't pronounce a click, when you can't pronounce any other, those unfamiliar sounds, when we laugh, we are actually making fools of ourselves because we are not recognizing that you come from a different linguistic set, but it is language, it is not knowledge. I think that is the one thing we need to put across. And Dr. Tony, you asked about the value of translation. There are 2 strategies in translation. The one strategy is taking translation is actually taking words from a certain language and replacing them with words in another language. So again, it's just language. Okay, so if I say, for instance, good morning, and I have to translate that into English. I will say there is no, what they say, they even make it worse. They say molweni kusasanje, and there's nothing like that. And so translation, the difficulty of the translation and the difficulty with the terminology is that we're taking one language and we're replacing it just with the language of a different language. And we are not creating diversity of knowledge. So we are just transferring one knowledge into another language. And what has happened, the sad thing is that what has happened in the South African context, that strategy is called foreignization in translation studies. You take a foreign concept, you just dump it in another language. What happens with that process is that it's also a process of erasing knowledge of the target language, the target culture. So what I would prefer for me is the construction of texts in a different language, and this is done at UWC, is that you have a text in English, let's say they're teaching metamorphosis, and it was in dentistry, they were teaching the molars, the premolars, and all that, the structure of the teeth. And there was a text in English, and what they did is that they involved students and lecturers to construct new texts around the knowledge that was presented in English. So the new text becomes new in the context of language, but also reflecting the knowledge of the culture of the target language. So for instance, if you're talking about, I think these are called incisors, these teeth, amabamba, so, and in English you call them dog teeth. And it's an insult, esiXhoseni, if you're gonna say amazinyo ezinja, because it brings in something else. Or no, it's canine teeth. So it's an insult if you're gonna translate that as amazinyo ezinja, as if we don't have amabamba, So in other words, if one translates in that way, foreignizing, you are erasing knowledge that exists in the culture. And so amabamba has got knowledge embedded in the society, in that ukubamba, it's something that you grab something in it. In Tlafuno, you chew with it, so the molar and all those things don't make sense in a child who comes. We know the state of our schools and the teaching in our schools, because when students come to universities, they don't possess the proficiency we expect of them. Or let me not say we expect, that the university expects them when they come. And so we move above them, we leave them behind. So they're not gonna know molars and premolars and all that. But if you say imola in Tlafuno, the way it's named from the action of the teeth chewing, So the meaning becomes easy to be transferred. That's translanguaging, transferring it to the concept of, not a concept, because the concept of kuhlafuna is there, but to the term now that is used in English to name this concept. So for me, translation has to be, if it is done, there has to be strategies that are really adopted and that don't erase the knowledge, and that don't continuously, in a way, make knowledge in the language unfamiliar to the speakers of the language. Yeah, so that is my response.
Thank you, Prof. Maseko. I am tempted to say to be continued, but I don't want to say it just for saying it, but I want to mean it, to say that let's have another appointment where we can take this further. But I will engage with my team, and I will make friends with your office, the person who is responsible for your diary, because you are a very busy person. As you were talking, I was getting text messages to say, can't we make her a permanent feature here? So she is an executive dean, but that can be arranged. So I will follow my strategies with your office, not with you, but with your office, to make sure that we have you in July, and we have you again in 2023. Thank you ever so much.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you for everybody for participating and engaging. And if I helped in any way to have you think differently about language, that's great. Also, for people who disagree, I really don't like that there's no one who says, no, I don't agree with you, but I hope that we're able to get that engagement at a different time, Dr. Tony. But thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Anne, can you conclude so that people know what to do for tomorrow? Thank you so much, Prof. Maseko.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof, from my side too. As the coordinator of BYJ, it was awesome to have you here. It's really, I was one of those people texting Multilingualism going now. So thank you very, very much. Everyone else, thank you for staying. And I see the messages of people having to leave and come back because of load shedding and connectivity issues. Thank you for not giving up and persisting and staying as long as you have. Tomorrow, there is very little prep. We are dealing with our students tomorrow. We have our learning development team coming in tomorrow morning. There was a link that was shared by Ronel. I have emailed that through, and it's also, the video is also shared with our files. But if you are not able to access the link, or you might have lost it, just pop me a mail and I'll send it immediately. It's just a little video to watch. And then after that, we have a session with Intumjeni, our student wellness section. And then we conclude. So tomorrow is I'm not saying a relaxed day, but a short day and very little preparation. So thank you very much, and I'll see you all tomorrow morning at 9.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye.